There is something happening right now that you have been treating as if it can wait. You have been moving through your days as if the invitation is always open, as if the door stays unlocked indefinitely, as if the version of yourself you keep meaning to become will still be available to you next week, next month, next year, whenever you finally get around to looking at it directly. But something in you clicked on this video. Something in you read those words, one chance, and felt a recognition that your mind immediately tried to dismiss. That flicker of knowing, that quiet alarm that went off in the part of you that sees more clearly than the part of you that plans and postpones and rationalizes. That part of you is not panicking, it is not afraid, it is simply pointing. It is saying, look here, look now. Because what is being offered right now in this precise moment of your life is not going to be offered in exactly this form again. And you already know that, you just haven't been willing to look at it directly. So today you look, not because someone is threatening you, not because you have failed, not because the window is closing and you need to scramble, but because there is a specific kind of moment that arrives in a life, a moment that quantum physics, ancient wisdom, and the deep architecture of consciousness all agree upon, where the field of possibility is maximally open, where the probability waves are arranged in a particular configuration that makes transformation not just possible, but almost inevitable for anyone willing to observe it clearly. That moment is not always. That moment is specific. That moment is now. And the most important thing you can do in a moment like this is not to act frantically. It is not to force. It is not to manufacture urgency from fear. The most important thing you can do in a moment like this is to watch it, to see it clearly, to stop looking away from the fact that something is being activated in you right now. Something that had been waiting for your full, unflinching attention. Because here is what no one tells you about selection, about being chosen, about the ancient principle that runs through every spiritual tradition, that has been confirmed in the language of quantum mechanics, that you have felt in your own life in those rare moments when everything seemed to align. You are not selected despite your awareness. You are selected through it. The activation is not something that happens to you while you're distracted. It happens in the moment you finally look. So let's look together all the way through, because what you see in the next hour has the potential to reorganize everything that comes after it. Not because of anything I tell you, but because of what you are about to observe in yourself. Look closer. There is a principle in quantum mechanics called the observer effect. You may have heard of it. You may have heard it referenced loosely, casually in the context of manifestation or consciousness, or the idea that your thoughts shape your reality. But most people who reference it have never actually looked at what it says. They have used it as a metaphor without examining the precise, measurable, scientifically documented phenomenon that it describes. So let's look at it precisely, because this is not philosophy, this is measurable. In quantum physics, a particle, an electron, a photon, any fundamental unit of matter and energy does not have a fixed, definite position or state until it is observed. Before observation, it exists as a wave function, a field of probabilities. Every possible state it could be in, superimposed on top of each other, all equally real, all simultaneously present. The electron is not in one place. It is in all possible places at once, with varying degrees of probability, and then something observes it, and the wave function collapses. The probability field resolves into a single, specific, definite state. The particle is here, not there, this, not that. The act of observation, the act of a measuring instrument, a detector, a conscious system interacting with the quantum field, is what causes possibility to become reality. This is not a theory. This is not a philosophical interpretation. This has been demonstrated in laboratory conditions thousands of times. The double-slit experiment, the quantum eraser, Bell's theorem. These are not metaphors. They are measurements. They are the universe showing us, in the most precise language available to science, that observation is not passive. Observation is creative. Observation is the mechanism by which potential becomes actual. Now watch what happens when you apply this to your life. You are not a fixed, definite person moving through a fixed, definite reality. You are a probability field, a vast, superimposed collection of every version of yourself that could exist. The version that transforms, the version that stays the same, the version that rises to meet this moment, the version that looks away and wonders later what might have been. All of those versions are simultaneously real until something collapses the wave function. And what collapses it is observation, your observation, the quality and direction of your attention, what you choose to look at and how clearly you look at it. This is not a metaphor borrowed from physics. This is the same principle operating at the level of consciousness that operates at the level of subatomic particles. The observer is the creative force, not the thinker, not the planner, not the one who works hard or visualizes or affirms. The one who sees clearly, and right now, something is asking to be seen. If this kind of seeing is something you want to return to, subscribe to this channel and like this video. It helps more people find their way to this kind of looking. There is a specific configuration in your life right now, a specific arrangement of circumstances, relationships, inner states, and possibilities that has been assembled with extraordinary precision. You may not recognize it as such. You may look at your life and see problems, delays, frustrations, things that haven't worked out the way you planned. But look closer, because what you have been calling obstacles may be the exact architecture of a selection process you haven't understood yet. Because selection, real selection, the kind that ancient texts speak of and that consciousness science is beginning to map, is not random. It is not arbitrary. It does not come to those who have their lives perfectly arranged. It comes in the midst of the arrangement. It comes when the probability field is most open. It comes when you are standing at the exact threshold where looking away and looking directly are both still possible. And the choice between them is still yours to make. Tonight, that choice is available to you, and it will not be available in exactly this form again. But here's what I need you to understand before we go deeper. The urgency you feel right now, if you feel it, is not fear. Do not let your mind convert it into fear. Fear looks away. Fear contracts. Fear says, I am not ready. I am not worthy. This is too much. Let me come back to this when I am more prepared. What you are feeling right now, if you're honest about it, is recognition. It is the part of you that has been watching, that has been waiting, that has been holding the question open, finally feeling the question answered, not with words, with presence, with the specific quality of attention that arrives when something real is happening. Stay with that. Do not look away from it, because the moment you look away, the wave function shifts. the probability distribution changes, and the particular version of yourself that this moment was assembled to activate becomes not impossible, but less probable. Measurably less probable. You have one chance to be the observer of this moment, right now, not later, now. Watch what happens in your body when you hear that. Not the thought about it, not the interpretation, the actual physical sensation of receiving that information. Notice where it lands, notice what tightens or opens, notice what part of you wants to lean in and what part of you wants to scroll past this and find something more comfortable to watch. That discomfort is not a warning, it is a signal. It is the sensation of your probability field beginning to shift. It is what it feels like when observation starts to collapse a wave function that has been in superposition for too long. Stay here. Keep watching. We are just beginning. Let me show you something. There is a story, ancient in its bones, though I am going to tell it in a way that lets you see it clearly. There was a man named Elias who lived his entire life in a valley surrounded by mountains. The valley was not unpleasant. It had water, shelter, enough food to survive. Other people lived there too, and Elias had built a life among them. Not a great life, not a terrible one, but a life that functioned. A life that moved forward in predictable patterns. But there was something Elias had been avoiding looking at for years. Not a problem, exactly. Not a failure. Something more uncomfortable than either of those. There was a path that led out of the valley and up into the mountains, and every person who had ever taken that path had returned changed. Not all of them in the same way, but all of them carrying something they hadn't had before. A quality of seeing, a kind of knowing that was visible in their eyes. Elias had watched these people return. He had even asked some of them what they had seen. And they always struggled to explain it in a way that satisfied him. They said things like, "You have to go yourself." They said, "The path shows you something that can only be seen from up there." They said, "It is not what you find at the top. It is what you see about the valley from a different elevation." And Elias had nodded and said, "Yes, I will go. Soon, when things settle down, when the timing is better, when I feel ready." For years, he said this, and the path remained there, and other people took it. And some of them came back and some of them didn't. Not because the path was dangerous, but because once you see the valley from the mountain, some people choose not to return to it. They find another valley, a different life, a version of themselves that the old valley couldn't contain. And Elias watched this happen, and he told himself, "I am still deciding. I have not yet been called." But here's what Elias did not understand. And here's what I need you to understand, because this is the layer underneath everything we are talking about today. The path does not call everyone at the same time. The path does not remain equally accessible forever. There are seasons, there are configurations, there are specific moments when the path is lit in a particular way, when the conditions of your inner life and outer circumstance align in a specific arrangement that makes the ascent not just possible but almost effortless, because you are being carried by something larger than your own effort. And there are other times when the path is still there but the alignment is gone, when you have to work against the current instead of with it, when what could have been a single step of clear seeing becomes years of difficult climbing. Elias had lived through 3 such seasons without knowing it. He had felt the pull, felt the particular quality of aliveness that comes when the path is lit. and each time he had looked away. Not out of cowardice, out of the particular kind of avoidance that disguises itself as wisdom. I will wait until I am ready. I will go when the time is right. He did not understand that the feeling of rightness, the feeling of being called, was not a preliminary to the moment. It was the moment. And now a fourth season was arriving. Elias could feel it. He could feel it in the way the light looked different in the mornings, in the way his sleep had become strange and vivid, in the way he kept finding himself standing at the edge of the valley, looking up at the path, not with his usual comfortable ambivalence, but with something sharper, something that felt like the last chance to choose something he had been choosing against for years without fully admitting it. And the question that faced Elias, the question that faces you right now, was not, am I worthy of the path? It was not, am I ready? It was not even, what will I find at the top? The question was simply, am I willing to look? Am I willing to stop treating this as something I will get to and actually look at what is being offered right now in this precise moment before the season shifts again? Elias looked. For the first time, really looked. Not at the path, at himself, at the part of himself that had been saying soon, not yet, when I'm ready. And what he saw when he looked at that part directly, when he turned the full force of his attention on it without flinching, was not what he expected. He expected to find fear. He expected to find unworthiness. He expected to find some deep inadequacy that had been driving the avoidance. What he found instead was a habit, a groove worn into his consciousness by years of looking away. Not a wound, not a fundamental flaw, a pattern. A repeated choice that had calcified into what felt like a fixed characteristic but was, under direct observation, revealed to be nothing more than an unconsidered reflex. And the moment he saw it clearly, the moment his observation collapsed the wave function of that pattern, it lost its power over him. Not through effort, not through willpower, not through years of therapy or spiritual practice, through a single act of clear seeing. He took the path that morning, and what he found at the top is not the point of this story. The point is what happened the moment he looked directly at the thing he had been avoiding looking at. The point is that the transformation did not begin when he reached the summit. It began the moment he stopped looking away. And you have been both Elias and the path. You have been both the one who looks and the one who looks away. But today you chose to look, and that choice is already changing the probability distribution of what comes next. If there was a specific moment in Elias's story where you recognized yourself, a season you remember not taking, a pull you remember looking away from, I want you to name it in the comments. Just one line. What was the path you saw but didn't take, and what did you tell yourself at the time? Let's go deeper into what you're actually seeing. Because the concept of divine selection, of being chosen, of activation, of God or the universe or consciousness itself, turning its attention toward a specific person at a specific moment, this is one of the most ancient and most consistently misunderstood ideas in human spiritual history. Most people hear the word selection and immediately begin sorting themselves. Am I one of the selected? Am I worthy of being chosen? What did I do to earn this or fail to earn it? And in doing so, they make the same mistake Elias made. They look at the concept of selection from the outside as if it is a verdict being rendered by an authority separate from themselves, and they miss the actual mechanics of how selection works. Here's what every major wisdom tradition, when you look at it closely enough, is actually saying about selection. And here's what quantum mechanics, when you examine the observer effect at its deepest level, confirms about this process. Selection is not the choosing of one person over another. Selection is the activation of a specific configuration within a consciousness that has reached a particular threshold of readiness. It is not God pointing at you from outside the system and saying, "You, not them." It is the moment when the observer within you, the part of you that is made of the same substance as the observing force that runs through all of reality, reaches a sufficient clarity that the probability field of your life can collapse into its highest configuration. You are not selected because you are better than someone else. You are selected because you have reached a moment of sufficient observation, sufficient willingness to look, sufficient courage to stop averting your gaze from the exact thing that, when seen clearly, transforms everything. And this is why the timing matters. This is why tonight matters. Not because some external deity has a calendar and has penciled you in, but because the conditions within you and around you, the specific arrangement of your readiness, your circumstances, your accumulated experiences, your accumulated avoidances, have created a window, a precise, temporary, specific window of maximum observational clarity. In quantum terms, your wave function is in a state of maximum superposition right now. Every version of yourself is equally possible. The version that transforms, that rises, that steps into the fullness of what you are capable of. And the version that looks away again, that waits again, that says soon and not yet for another season. Both are equally real right now. Both are available. The observation you make in this moment, the quality of attention you bring to this window, is what collapses the wave function into one or the other. This is not pressure. This is the most precise description of what is actually happening that I can offer you. And you deserve precision. You deserve to see this clearly rather than to be told to believe it or to feel it or to hope that it's true. Watch what happens in your body when you consider this. When you sit with the possibility that the specific arrangement of your life right now, including the difficulties, including the delays, including the things that haven't worked out yet, is not a sign that you are not ready. It is the sign that you are, that the wave function is open, that the probability field is arranged in exactly the configuration that makes selection possible. What do you notice? What shifts? What wants to contract and what wants to expand? Watch it. Don't interpret it yet. Just watch. Because here's the layer underneath that. Here's what most people miss when they think about divine timing and selection and activation. They think of it as something that arrives from outside and does something to them, as if God or the universe is a separate agent that reaches into their life and rearranges it. And because they think of it this way, they spend their energy waiting for the rearrangement rather than participating in the observation that makes it possible. But the ancient texts, when you read them carefully, when you look at them not as historical artifacts but as precise maps of consciousness, describe something different. They describe selection as a mutual recognition, not a one-way transmission, not a verdict rendered by an external authority. A recognition, a moment when the observing consciousness within a person and the observing consciousness that underlies all of reality, what some call God, what physics calls the quantum field, what meditation traditions call pure awareness, look at each other simultaneously. And in that mutual looking, the wave function collapses into its highest form. This is what is meant by activation. Not that something is done to you, but that you and the field recognize each other, that the observer within you becomes clear enough, still enough, direct enough in its gaze that the field responds, not because it was waiting for you to earn it, because recognition is a two-way phenomenon. You cannot be recognized by something you are refusing to look at, and you have been, in various ways, refusing to look at this. Not because you are not ready, not because you are not worthy, but because seeing it clearly would make it impossible to keep living the way you have been living. And that is terrifying, even when the life you have been living is not the one you want. Even when you know, in the clearest part of your knowing, that what is being offered is larger and truer and more aligned with what you actually are. The terror is not about the path. The terror is about what you will have to stop pretending when you take it. Look at that right now. Look at what you would have to stop pretending. Not with judgment, not with the intention to fix or change or force yourself into a different shape. Just look. What is the specific thing you have been pretending is not there? What is the version of yourself you have been keeping carefully out of your direct line of sight? What is the possibility you have been treating as too large, too real, too transformative to look at directly? You already know. You have always known. The fact that you are still here, still watching, means you are willing to see it. And that willingness, that precise, specific, present moment willingness to look, is the activation, not a preliminary to it, not a step toward it, the activation itself. Now let's talk about what happens in the body when a wave function collapses. This is where quantum mechanics and somatic experience converge in a way that most people have never had mapped for them. And I want to map it for you precisely, because understanding this will help you recognize the activation when it is happening rather than second-guessing it. When a quantum system undergoes wave function collapse, when the field of possibilities resolves into a specific, definite state, there is a release of energy. The superposition required energy to maintain. All those simultaneous possibilities, held in tension with each other, required the system to sustain a kind of dynamic equilibrium. When the observation collapses the wave function, that energy is released. The system settles, it becomes definite, it becomes real in a new way. Now watch what happens in your body when you stop avoiding something you have been avoiding. There is a moment of discomfort first. That is the superposition releasing. That is the energy that was required to maintain all those simultaneous possibilities, including the possibility of continued avoidance, beginning to resolve. It can feel like anxiety. It can feel like a tightening in the chest or the throat. It can feel like the strange, slightly nauseating sensation of something important happening that you cannot control. And then, if you stay with it, if you keep observing rather than looking away, there is a settling, a clarity, a sense of something becoming real that was previously only potential. This is not a feeling you manufacture. This is a felt sense of wave function collapse, of your probability field resolving into a more definite, more aligned, more activated state. Most people, when they feel the first part, the discomfort, the tightening, the sense of something important and uncontrollable happening, look away. They interpret the discomfort as a signal to stop, to protect themselves, to return to the comfortable superposition of all possibilities held in careful, unresolved tension. But the discomfort is not a stop sign. It is the sensation of transformation beginning. It is the feeling of the field responding to your observation. It is the most reliable indicator that you are in the right place, looking at the right thing at exactly the right moment. Stay with it. Keep watching. Let the wave function complete its collapse. And here's what you will find on the other side of that settling. Here's what every person who has ever undergone a genuine activation, whether they described it in quantum terms or spiritual terms, or simply as a moment when their life changed, reports finding on the other side of that discomfort. Clarity. Not the clarity of having all the answers, not the clarity of knowing exactly what to do next, the clarity of knowing with absolute precision what you are, what you have always been, what has been waiting beneath all the layers of avoidance and postponement and comfortable superposition. And from that clarity, action becomes not an effort but an expression, not a forcing of the field but a flowing with it, not a manifestation technique but a natural consequence of being in full alignment with what you actually are. This is what activation feels like. Not a lightning bolt from outside, a recognition from within, a wave function collapse that reveals what was always there, waiting for the observation that would make it real. Pause here. This is not a thought exercise. This is an observation. I want you to do something right now, not later, not after you finish watching. Now. Find a position where your spine can be relatively upright. It doesn't need to be perfect, just enough that you are not collapsed into yourself. Take one breath, a real breath, not a performed breath, an actual breath that goes all the way down and actually moves your body. And now watch your thoughts for 30 seconds. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to direct them. Just watch them. Notice them arising, notice them passing, notice the part of you that is watching them. Who is watching? Not what is being watched, who is doing the watching. Find that, rest in that, even for a moment, even if it's unstable and hard to locate, even if the watching awareness seems to flicker in and out. Find it, because that watching awareness is the observer. That is the position from which wave functions collapse. That is the consciousness that, when it turns its attention towards something with full clarity and without flinching, causes the probability field to respond. That is the part of you that is being activated right now. Not your personality, not your history, not your plans or your fears or your self-concept. The watching awareness, the one who sees. That is who is being selected, that is who is being called, and that is who has been here, watching, waiting for you to stop mistaking yourself for the thoughts and start recognizing yourself as the one who watches them. Stay in that for a moment. Don't rush past what you just saw. Now let's go deeper, because we have been talking about selection and activation in general terms, and I want to get precise. I want to talk about what it actually means for God, for the organizing intelligence of reality, for the quantum field, for the consciousness that underlies all of existence, to activate a selection in a specific person at a specific moment. Because this is where the concept gets dangerous. Not dangerous in a harmful way, dangerous in the way that real truth is always dangerous. Because it dismantles the comfortable frameworks you have been using to manage your relationship with the possible. The most common framework people use to manage their relationship with divine selection is this. I am waiting to be worthy enough to be chosen. I am working toward a state of readiness. I am preparing myself so that when the moment of selection comes, I will be sufficient for it. This framework feels humble. It feels appropriately cautious. It feels like the responsible thing to say when someone asks if you believe you are selected or chosen or activated. But look at it closely. Look at what it is actually doing. It is making your observation of yourself, your willingness to see yourself clearly, to recognize what you actually are, contingent on first achieving a state of worthiness that you get to define, which means you can always find a reason why you are not quite there yet. You can always locate another inadequacy, another area of growth needed, another preparation required before you're ready to look directly at the full scope of what you are and what is being offered. It is the most sophisticated form of looking away that exists. It disguises avoidance as virtue. It makes the refusal to observe yourself clearly look like humility. But here is what the quantum field and every genuine wisdom tradition and the deepest part of your own knowing actually says about readiness. You are not selected after you become ready. You become ready through the act of allowing yourself to be selected. The readiness is not a prerequisite, it is a consequence. It is what happens to a consciousness that stops waiting to be worthy and starts observing itself clearly enough to recognize that the worthiness was never in question. This is the inversion that changes everything. This is the layer that most people never reach, because the framework of earning worthiness is so deeply embedded that it feels like reality rather than a construction. You are not working toward the moment of activation. The moment of activation is working toward you. It has been assembling itself. It has been arranging the conditions. It has been waiting, not for you to become something different, but for you to look clearly enough at what you already are. And tonight, in this specific, temporary, precisely configured window, the conditions are aligned, the probability field is open, the wave function is in maximum superposition, and the observation you make right now, the clarity you bring to this moment, the willingness you demonstrate to look directly at the full scope of what you are and what is being offered. This is the activation, not a step toward it, the activation itself. Watch what your mind does with that. Watch the resistance that arises. Watch the part of you that wants to say, but I haven't done enough, I haven't changed enough, I haven't proven enough. Watch that part. Don't fight it. Don't try to convince it. Just watch it. Because when you watch it clearly enough, you will see what it is. You will see that it is not wisdom. It is not discernment. It is not appropriate humility. It is a pattern, a groove, a habit of looking away from the full scope of what you are, dressed up in the language of spiritual preparation. And the moment you see it clearly, it begins to lose its power over you. Not through effort, through observation. This is not what you think it is. What you have been calling preparation has, in many cases, been avoidance. What you have been calling patience has, in many cases, been postponement. What you have been calling humility has, in many cases, been the refusal to look directly at the enormity of what you actually are and what you are actually capable of. Look at that. Right now. Look at the enormity, not with arrogance, not with inflation, with simple, clear, unflinching observation. What are you actually? Not what you have been told you are, not what your history suggests you are, not what your fears insist you are. What are you when you look at yourself from the position of the watching awareness? When you observe yourself from the place that is neither self-aggrandizing nor self-diminishing, but simply clear. You are a consciousness capable of observing itself. You are a probability field capable of collapsing into its highest configuration. You are a wave function that contains, right now, every version of yourself that is possible, including the one that is fully activated, fully aligned, fully expressing what it was assembled to express. That version is not in the future. It is not waiting for you to become ready. It is in the superposition right now. It is one of the equally real possibilities that your observation is about to collapse into definiteness. The question is not whether you deserve it. The question is whether you are willing to look at it directly. Let me show you something else. There is a second story I need to tell you, because the first story was about Elias and the path, and it was about recognizing the moment. But this story is about what happens after the recognition, about what the activation actually requires of you, and about the specific thing that most people, even those who recognize the moment, still refuse to look at. Her name was Mira, and Mira was not someone who struggled with recognition. She had recognized her moments. She had felt the pull of the path, the lit-up quality of the seasons when selection was available, the particular aliveness that arrives when the probability field is open. She had felt all of it, and she had not looked away. But there was something she had not yet looked at, something she kept circling without quite seeing directly. And it was this: she had been carrying a version of herself that she had outgrown, and she had not been willing to observe it clearly enough to let it go. Not because she was attached to it, not because it was comfortable. She had, in fact, been uncomfortable with it for years. She knew it didn't fit anymore. She knew it was a construction that had served her at an earlier stage of her life and had since become a constraint. But she had not looked at it directly. She had looked around it. She had looked at the places where it caused friction. She had looked at the ways it limited her. But she had not looked at it as a whole with clear eyes and said, "This is what this is. This is a construction. This is not me. This is something I built in response to circumstances that no longer exist. And I have been maintaining it out of habit and familiarity, not out of truth." Because looking at it that way, seeing it clearly as a construction rather than as herself, would mean something she was not quite ready to face. It would mean she didn't know who she was without it. And that is the specific thing that most people, even those who have recognized the moment of selection, even those who have felt the activation beginning, even those who have taken the first steps on the path, most people are not willing to look at directly. The question of who you are when you are not the construction, because the construction is familiar. It is the self you have been performing for years, sometimes decades. It is the identity that has organized your relationships, your choices, your self-narrative. It is the lens through which you have been observing everything, which means it is very difficult to observe the lens itself. You can see through it, but you cannot easily see it until you stop, until you turn the observation around, until you ask not, "What am I seeing?" but "What is the thing that has been doing the seeing? What is this lens? What is its shape? What distortions has it been introducing into my perception of reality and myself?" Mira finally looked, not because she had worked up the courage, not because she had done enough spiritual practice, because she reached a moment, a specific, configured, precisely aligned moment, like the one you are in right now, where the cost of not looking finally exceeded the cost of looking. And what she saw when she looked directly at the construction was not emptiness. She had feared emptiness. She had feared that if she looked at the identity she had been maintaining and saw it clearly as a construction, she would find nothing underneath. That the self she had been protecting and maintaining was all there was, and dismantling it would leave her with nothing. What she found instead was the watching awareness, the observer, the consciousness that had been there the whole time, watching the construction, watching the performance, watching the identity, and had never been identical to any of it. She found the one who sees. And from that position, from the position of the observer rather than the observed, she recognized something that reorganized everything she thought she knew about herself and her life. She recognized that the activation she had been waiting for, the selection she had been hoping for, the transformation she had been working toward, none of it was blocked by her circumstances. None of it was blocked by her history. None of it was blocked by the inadequacies she had been cataloging for years. It was blocked by the construction, by the identity she had been maintaining instead of observing, by the lens she had been looking through instead of looking at. And the moment she looked at it directly, the moment she saw it clearly as a construction and not as herself, it began to dissolve. Not into chaos, into clarity, into the recognition of what was actually there underneath the construction. The watching awareness, the observer, the one who had always been present, always been capable, always been in full possession of everything needed for the activation, and had been waiting not for the circumstances to change, but for the construction to be seen clearly enough to release. And you have a construction. You know what it is. You have been circling it without looking at it directly. You have been feeling the friction it creates, noticing the ways it limits you, aware of the gap between who you are performing yourself to be and who you actually are. When no one is watching and you are not managing your self-presentation, you don't have to name it out loud. You don't have to explain it to anyone. You just have to look at it right now, in this moment, with the full, clear, unflinching attention of the observer that you are. What is the construction? What is the identity you have been maintaining that is not actually you? Look at it, not with judgment, not with the intention to fix it or dismantle it through effort. Just look at it, because looking at it, seeing it clearly as a construction, is the act that begins its dissolution. Not your effort, not your willpower, your observation. That's not belief. That's quantum mechanics. If you want to go deeper into exactly this kind of work, the precise, structured practice of observing your constructions until they dissolve, the Quantum Watcher program was built for this. This video only touches the surface of what becomes possible when you apply the observer effect as a complete system. The full framework, the guided practices, and the step-by-step process for collapsing your wave function into its highest form are all inside. You can find it at the link in the description. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. Has there been a moment in your own life, a specific one, when you saw a construction clearly and watched it begin to dissolve? When something you had been maintaining as real revealed itself to simply be a pattern? If you're willing, share it in the comments, not to perform insight, just to name what you saw. Because naming it here in this space with others who are also looking, that act of shared observation changes the field for everyone reading. Now let's talk about what tonight means. because the title of this transmission uses the word tonight deliberately. And I want to be precise about what that means, because it is easy to hear it as pressure and miss what it is actually pointing at. Tonight is not a deadline imposed from outside. Tonight is not a threat. Tonight is a recognition of something that quantum physics, ancient wisdom, and the direct experience of every person who has ever undergone genuine transformation all confirm. There are specific moments when the field is maximally open. When the probability distribution is arranged in the configuration that makes collapse into the highest form, not just possible but almost effortless for anyone willing to observe clearly. These moments are not always, they are not random. They are the product of a specific convergence of inner and outer conditions that creates a window, a temporary, precisely configured window, of maximum transformational availability. And the reason tonight matters is not because something terrible will happen if you miss it. It is because the particular configuration that exists right now, the specific arrangement of your readiness, your circumstances, your accumulated observations, your willingness to look, will not exist in exactly this form again. Not because God is withholding, not because the universe is punishing, because configuration is specific, because moments are particular, because the probability field that is open right now in this precise convergence of conditions is a specific thing. And specific things are, by definition, not indefinitely reproducible. There will be other moments. There will be other windows. The field is not cruel. The invitation is not a one-time offer in the sense that the door closes forever if you walk past it tonight. But the particular version of the invitation that is available right now, the specific configuration of your probability field, the specific arrangement of conditions that makes this particular form of activation possible, this is unique to this moment. And the you that will be available to receive it in its next form will be a different you. You shaped by tonight's choice, whether that choice is to look or to look away. So when I say you won't get a second chance, I am not threatening you. I am pointing at something precise. The second chance, if it comes, will be for a different version of you, in a different configuration, looking at a different arrangement of possibilities. The chance that exists right now, the specific, precise, configured window of this moment, is singular, and you are in it, right now, still. Despite everything your mind has been doing to manage this information, despite the resistance, despite the part of you that wants to categorize this and file it and come back to it later, you are still here, still watching, still in the window. That is not an accident. That is the observer in you, refusing to look away. Honor that, not with performance, not with forced emotion, with the simple, direct act of continuing to look. Let's go to the next layer, because we have been talking about selection and activation and the observer effect. And I want to bring all of these threads together into something you can actually use. Not as a philosophy to carry around, as a practice, as the specific way of being in your life that changes the probability distribution of what happens next. The practice is this: become the witness of your own life rather than the reactor to it. This sounds simple. It is not easy, but it is the most powerful thing you can do. And here is why precisely. When you are reacting to your life, when you are in the mode of responding to events, managing circumstances, solving problems, trying to control outcomes, you are in the position of the observed, not the observer. You are inside the wave function, not the consciousness that collapses it. You are being shaped by the probability field rather than shaping it. But when you step into the witness position, when you observe your reactions rather than being your reactions, when you watch your thoughts rather than being your thoughts, when you see your circumstances rather than being defined by them, you shift into the most powerful position available in the quantum field. The observer position, the position from which wave functions collapse, the position from which possibility becomes actuality. This is not detachment, this is not spiritual bypassing, this is not the pretense that nothing affects you. The witness feels everything, the witness is fully present in the experience. But the witness is not identical to the experience. The witness sees the experience from a position of clarity that allows it to observe without being consumed. And here is what happens when you inhabit the witness position consistently. When you make it not just a practice, but a way of being, the probability field around you reorganizes, not because you are controlling it, because you are observing it clearly, because the clarity of your observation is itself a creative force. Because what you watch, you change. And when you watch your life from the position of the clear witness, your life changes in the direction of its highest configuration. This is the quantum mechanics of spiritual transformation, not a metaphor, a description of the actual mechanism by which consciousness shapes reality. And the activation that is available tonight, the selection that is being offered in this specific window, is an invitation into this position. Not just as a practice you do sometimes, as a permanent shift in the way you relate to your own experience. A shift from reactor to witness, from observed to observer, from someone who is shaped by the wave function to the consciousness that collapses it. This is what is being activated tonight. This is what the selection is selecting you for, not a better life in the sense of more comfortable circumstances. A clearer position from which to observe and therefore shape every circumstance that arises. And the practice, the specific embodied practice, is this. Every time you notice yourself reacting, every time you feel the pull of an emotion, or the grip of a fear, or the momentum of a habitual thought pattern, pause, just for a moment, one breath, and ask, who is watching this? Not what is happening. Who is watching it? Find the watcher, even for a fraction of a second, even if you immediately get pulled back into the reaction. Find the watcher and recognize it as you. Not the reaction, the one who watches the reaction. That recognition, repeated consistently, is the practice. That recognition, accumulated over time, is the transformation. That recognition, in this specific moment, is the activation. You already know how to do this. You have been doing it in glimpses for your entire life. Every moment of genuine clarity you have ever had. Every moment when you stepped back from a situation and saw it from a larger perspective. Every moment when you caught yourself in a pattern and recognized it as a pattern rather than as reality. That was this. That was the observer. That was the wave function collapsing into its highest form. Tonight is the invitation to stop treating those moments as exceptions and start treating them as your natural state. To stop being surprised by the clarity and start inhabiting it as your home position. This is the activation. This is the selection. This is what God or the quantum field or the organizing intelligence of reality is offering you right now in this specific window. The question is not whether you are worthy of it. You are the observer. The observer is always worthy of observing. The question is whether you are willing to inhabit it fully, to stop flinching, to stop looking away, to stop treating the witness position as something you visit occasionally and start recognizing it as what you actually are. Watch what happens in your body when you consider that. When you sit with the possibility that the witness is not something you achieve, it is something you are. That the activation is not something that happens to you. It is something you recognize yourself into. What settles, what opens, what becomes visible that wasn't visible before. Stay with that. Don't rush past what you just saw. Now let's talk about the specific thing that blocks this recognition. The specific thing that stands between the version of you that is reacting to life and the version of you that is witnessing it. Because this is the layer underneath everything else we have covered. This is the most important thing we will look at today. And it is the thing that most people never look at directly because it is so close to them that it is nearly invisible. The thing that blocks the recognition of the observer is the belief that the observer would be lonely. Look at that. Look at it carefully. Because this is not an abstract philosophical point. This is a precise description of the specific fear that keeps most people from inhabiting the witness position fully. When you step into the observer position, when you genuinely inhabit the watching awareness rather than identifying with the thoughts and reactions and identity constructions, there is a moment of profound aloneness. Not loneliness in the sense of being abandoned, aloneness in the sense of being singular, of being the one who sees rather than one of the many who are seen. The observer is, by definition, not in the crowd. The observer is the one watching the crowd. And there is something in the human psyche that experiences this as a form of separation, as a form of loss, as the price of clarity. And so most people, even those who have glimpsed the observer position, even those who have felt the activation beginning, pull back from full inhabitation of it. They allow themselves to be partially the witness and partially the reactor. They maintain a foot in both positions. They observe from a slight distance, but not from full clarity. They keep themselves just close enough to the reactions, the identifications, the constructions, to feel connected to the experience of being human. And this is understandable, and it is also the precise thing that prevents full activation. Because here is what the full inhabitation of the observer position actually reveals when you stop flinching and look at it directly. The aloneness is not separation. It is singularity, and singularity is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of something more fundamental than the connections you have been using to manage the fear of separation. When you are fully in the observer position, when you are genuinely the watching awareness rather than the constructed identity, you do not experience separation from life. You experience intimacy with it. A more direct, more unmediated, more complete intimacy than is possible when you are identifying with a particular construction of yourself. Because the construction is always managing, always protecting, always filtering the raw experience of reality through the lens of its particular history and fears and needs. And that filtering, while it provides a sense of safety and familiarity, also creates distance. It keeps you at arm's length from the full, direct, unmediated experience of what is actually happening. The observer does not filter. The observer sees, and seeing, when it is full and clear and unmediated, is the most intimate relationship with reality that is possible, more intimate than any constructed identity can achieve, because the constructed identity is always, at some level, separate from what it is constructing itself in relation to. This is what is on the other side of the fear of observer aloneness. Not emptiness, not separation, an intimacy with life that makes everything you have been managing your way through feel like it was happening behind glass. And this is what the activation opens into. This is what the selection is selecting you for. Not a more managed life, a more directly experienced one. Not a more controlled reality, a more clearly observed one. Not a better construction of yourself. The dissolution of the construction into the watching awareness that was always more real than anything it was watching. Look at that. Look at the enormity of what is being offered, not as something to be afraid of, as something to be seen clearly. Because the fear of it, the fear that the observer position would be lonely, that full clarity would mean separation from life rather than deeper intimacy with it. That fear is the last construction. That fear is the final lens that, when observed directly, dissolves into the watching awareness itself. And when it dissolves, when you look at it clearly enough that it loses its power to hold you in partial inhabitation of the observer position, what remains is the activation. Complete. Unqualified. The full collapse of the wave function into its highest configuration, tonight, in this window, in this specific, configured, precisely aligned moment that will not exist in exactly this form again. Now I want to do something different. I want to stop pointing outward at the concept, at the mechanics, at the parable, and point directly at you. At the specific person who is watching this right now, because you are not an abstraction. You are a specific consciousness in a specific life with specific circumstances and specific avoidances and specific constructions that have been shaping your experience of reality. And I want to speak to that specific person, not generically, not with the comfortable vagueness of spiritual content that could apply to anyone, and therefore, in its universality, sometimes applies to no one fully. You've been carrying something for a long time, not a burden in the sense of something terrible, a weight in the sense of something you have been maintaining that requires ongoing energy, a version of yourself, or a story about yourself, or a relationship with a possibility in your life, something that you have been holding in a particular way that is no longer the most accurate way to hold it. You know what it is. You have known for longer than you would like to admit. And the reason you have not looked at it directly is not because you are not ready. It is because looking at it directly would require you to change something. Not in the dramatic, everything falls apart sense. In the quiet, irreversible sense of, once I see this clearly, I cannot pretend I don't see it. And once I stop pretending, I will have to live differently. And living differently is terrifying, even when the different life is better, even when the different life is what you actually want, even when the current life is causing you ongoing low-grade suffering that you have become so accustomed to that you have stopped recognizing it as suffering and started treating it as just the way things are. Look at that. The low-grade suffering you have normalized. The ongoing friction between who you are and how you are living that you have learned to manage rather than resolve. The gap between the version of yourself you are performing and the version of yourself you actually are. The gap you have been bridging with effort and management. and the careful arrangement of circumstances to minimize the moments when the gap becomes visible. You are tired, not in the way that sleep fixes, in the way that only clarity fixes, in the way that only the cessation of maintenance fixes, in the way that only the dissolution of the construction into the watching awareness, the return to the observer position, can fix. And that is what tonight is offering you. Not more effort, not a better strategy, not a new framework for managing the gap. The dissolution of the gap itself, the return to the watching awareness that was always more real than the construction that has been creating the gap. This is the activation, this is the selection, this is what God, or the quantum field, or the organizing intelligence of reality, or whatever language most accurately describes the consciousness that underlies all of existence, is offering you right now. Not because you have earned it, not because you have become ready, but because the window is open and you are in it. And the watching awareness that you are has been waiting for this moment with a patience that exceeds anything your constructed identity can comprehend. And the only thing required of you, the only act that completes the activation, is to look, to stop looking away, to turn the full force of your attention on the thing you have been managing and maintaining and circling without seeing directly, and simply look at it. Not to fix it, not to change it, not to force it into a different shape through willpower or spiritual practice or positive thinking, just to look. Because looking, clear, direct, unflinching observation is the only force that transforms without resistance. The only force that changes the wave function without fighting it. The only force that collapses possibility into actuality without effort. You were built for this. You have always been built for this. The watching awareness that you are has been doing this your entire life, in the glimpses and the moments of clarity, and the rare, precious instances when you stepped out of the reaction and into the witness, and saw your life with a precision that surprised you. Tonight, you step in fully. Tonight, you don't step back out. Tonight, the glimpse becomes the home position. The visit becomes the permanent address. The occasional clarity becomes the baseline from which everything else is observed. This is what is available. This is what is being offered. This is the activation. Let's do one more practice, the deepest one. The one that the previous two were preparing you for. Pause here. This is not a thought exercise. This is an observation. I want you to close your eyes if you can. If you cannot, soften your gaze and let it rest unfocused somewhere in front of you. Take a breath, a real one. Let it move your body. And now I want you to observe the thing you have been avoiding looking at. Not by thinking about it, not by analyzing it, by simply turning your attention toward it the way you would turn a light toward something in a dark room. Not with judgment, not with the intention to fix it, just with the light of your attention. Let it be there. Let it be seen. Let the watching awareness rest on it without flinching. Notice what happens. Notice what changes. Notice what begins to dissolve and what becomes more clearly defined. Notice the discomfort of the wave function beginning to collapse and stay with it. Stay with the discomfort. It is the sensation of transformation. It is the feeling of the field responding to your observation. And now, from this position of clear seeing, I want you to notice something else. Notice the one who is doing the seeing, the watching awareness itself, the observer. Notice that it is not afraid of what it is seeing. Notice that it does not need the thing it is seeing to be different in order to remain stable. Notice that it is not destabilized by the discomfort of the collapse. The observer is steady. The observer is clear. The observer is the most stable thing in your experience right now. More stable than the thoughts, more stable than the emotions, more stable than the construction that has been organizing your experience of reality. Rest in that stability, not as an escape from what you are observing, as the ground from which you observe it. This is the observer state. This is the position from which activation happens. This is the consciousness that God or the quantum field or the organizing intelligence of reality is recognizing right now. Not the construction, not the history, not the fears, or the inadequacies or the carefully maintained identity. The watching awareness, the one who sees you, the actual you. Stay here as long as you can, and when you open your eyes, when you return to the surface of your life, try to carry this position with you, not as a technique you are applying, as a recognition of what you actually are. The observer, the watcher, the one who sees. That is who is being selected tonight. That is who the activation is for. Now let's bring this home. Because we have covered a great deal of ground, and I want to make sure you leave this transmission not with more information to manage, but with a single, clear, actionable recognition. The recognition is this: you are the observer, not sometimes, not in your best moments, not when you have done enough spiritual practice to deserve it. Always, fundamentally, in your nature. The watching awareness is not something you achieve. It is what you are when you stop identifying with the constructions. And the activation that is available tonight is not a transformation of your circumstances. It is a recognition of your nature, a return to the observer position, a collapse of the wave function of your identity from the superposition of all possible selves, including the one that keeps waiting to be ready, the one that keeps looking away, the one that keeps maintaining the construction, into the definite, specific, activated form of the one who sees clearly. This is not a small thing, this is the thing. This is what every genuine spiritual tradition, under all the different languages and frameworks and cultural expressions, is pointing at. The return to the observer, the recognition of the watching awareness as the ground of being, the shift from reactor to witness, from observed to observer, from inside the wave function to the consciousness that collapses it. And the reason tonight matters, the reason this specific window is precious, is not because the door closes forever if you don't walk through it tonight. It is because the particular configuration of conditions that makes this recognition available with this degree of ease, this degree of clarity, this degree of precision, this configuration is specific to this moment, and you are in it. And the watching awareness in you has been waiting for this moment with a patience that exceeds anything the constructed identity can comprehend. So look. Right now, don't look away. Don't file this away for later. Don't let the mind categorize it and schedule it and find a more convenient time to fully receive it. Look now. Because now is when the field is open. Now is when the probability distribution is arranged in the configuration that makes collapse into the highest form not just possible, but almost effortless. Now is when the selection is available. Now is when the activation is happening, and you are already in it. You have been in it since you clicked on this video, since something in you recognized the words and felt the recognition that your mind immediately tried to dismiss. Since the watching awareness in you turned its attention toward this transmission and said, yes, this, now, You already know this. You already see it. You just haven't fully admitted it to yourself yet. Admit it now. Not with words, with the simple act of staying in the observer position, of continuing to look, of refusing one more time to look away. That refusal, that choice to keep watching, is the activation, not a step toward it. The activation itself. Now watch what happens next. Watch what changes in the hours and days after this transmission. Watch the probability field begin to reorganize around your clarity. Watch the circumstances of your life begin to reflect the observer position you have inhabited tonight. Watch the constructions that have been limiting your experience of reality begin to dissolve, not through effort, not through force, but through the ongoing application of clear observation. Watch what you have been avoiding looking at begin to lose its power over you. Not because it has changed, because you are seeing it clearly now, and what is seen clearly cannot maintain the power that it draws from being avoided. Watch your relationships shift as you show up in them from the observer position rather than the reactor position. Watch the quality of your presence change. Watch what becomes possible when you are no longer spending energy on the maintenance of constructions that don't fit. Watch your life transform, not because you forced it, not because you manifested it, not because you worked harder or believed more fervently or followed a better strategy, but because you watched it, because you turned the full, clear, unflinching attention of the observer on it. And what you watch at the quantum level, you fundamentally change. This is the promise of tonight, not a guarantee of specific outcomes, a guarantee of the mechanism. The observer effect is not a theory, it is a measurement. It is the universe showing us in the most precise language available to science that observation is not passive, observation is creative. Observation is the mechanism by which potential becomes actual. You are the observer. You are the creative force. You are the consciousness that collapses the wave function of your life into its highest configuration. And tonight, you looked directly, without flinching, without looking away. That cannot be undone. What has been seen cannot be unseen. The wave function has begun to collapse. The activation is underway. Now here is what I want to ask of you. Not as a performance, not as a comment you type because you are supposed to, as a genuine act of observation. In the comments below, I want you to share one thing, not an essay, not a performance of transformation, one specific thing. What did you see when you looked? What was the specific thing you had been avoiding looking at that, in this transmission, you finally looked at directly? You don't have to explain it. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to make it sound impressive or spiritual or significant. Just name it. One word, one phrase, one sentence. What did you see? Because here is why this matters beyond the personal. When you name what you saw, when you bring it from the private space of your internal observation into the shared field of language, you complete the wave function collapse. You make it real in a new way. You bring the private recognition into the shared reality, and in doing so, you anchor it. You give it a form that persists beyond this moment, and you also contribute to the field. Because this channel is not a collection of individuals watching content in isolation. It is a field of observers, a community of people who have chosen to look where others won't. And when one observer names what they see, it makes it easier for the next observer to see it. The clarity is contagious. The courage to look is amplified by the knowledge that others are looking too. So share what you saw, type it, name it, make it real. And if this transmission has given you something, if the hour you spent here has shifted something in the way you see yourself and your life, consider returning to it when the noise of the day has settled, or in a moment when you feel yourself reacting instead of watching. That is when this kind of transmission does its deepest work. And if there is someone in your life who has been circling something they cannot quite look at directly, someone who needs to know that looking is survivable, that clarity is not the same as destruction, share this with them, not as a recommendation, as a permission slip. Because when someone you trust shows you that they had the courage to look, it changes what feels possible for you. Your clear seeing is not just yours. It expands the field of what others around you believe they are capable of seeing. That is not a small thing. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. Not because the content is good, though I hope it is, because you are a person who is willing to look. And this is a space that is built for people who are willing to look. A space where the question is never, is this comfortable? But always, is this true? A space where the standard is not agreement but clarity, not comfort but precision. Stay in this space, come back to it. Let it be one of the places where you practice the observer position, where you are reminded regularly that the watching awareness is your home, that the observer is the most powerful position in the universe, that what you watch, you change, and what you avoid watching controls you. Now let's close with the integration principle, the single thing I want you to carry from this transmission into everything that comes after it. The integration principle is this: the activation is not an event, it is a practice. It is the practice of returning again and again to the observer position, of noticing when you have slipped into the reactor position, when you are inside the wave function rather than observing it, and returning. Without judgment, without drama, without the story that you failed and need to start over, just returning, just the simple, direct act of asking, who is watching right now, and finding the watcher, and resting there even for a moment. Even if you immediately get pulled back into the reaction, the returning is the practice. The returning, repeated consistently, is the transformation. The returning, accumulated over time, is the life that reflects the highest configuration of your probability field. Tonight was not the beginning and the end. Tonight was the recognition, the beginning of the consistent practice of returning to what you recognized. And every time you return, every time you choose the observer position over the reactor position, every time you choose to look rather than look away, every time you choose clarity over comfortable avoidance, you complete the activation a little more. You collapse the wave function a little further into its highest form. You make the life that is available to you from the observer position a little more real, a little more definite, a little more fully expressed. This is the work, not dramatic, not effortful, just precise, just consistent, just the ongoing, patient, unflinching practice of returning to the one who sees. And you are capable of it, not because I am telling you that you are, because you demonstrated it tonight. You looked. When you could have looked away, you looked. When the mind offered you every reason to file this away for later, you stayed. when the discomfort of the wave function beginning to collapse made it tempting to return to the familiar superposition of comfortable avoidance. You stayed with the collapse. You already know how to do this. Tonight proved it. Now do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Not because you have to, because you have seen what becomes visible when you do. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. You are the observer, the most powerful position in the universe. Not because you control reality, because you see it clearly, and clarity is the only force that transforms without resistance. What you watch, you change. What you avoid watching controls you. Tonight you chose to watch. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. You were never meant to look away.